It is the time that you have all been waiting for. Our first look at the edTPA. edTPA Special Education is a national performance assessment that intends to measure readiness to teach learners with identified disabilities. The assessment is modeled after the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards and is designed with a focus on learning and principles from research and theory. Additionally, it is based on findings that successful teachers develop and apply their varied knowledge of their learners' needs. In this presentation, we will take our first look at the purpose and requirements of the edTPA. While the edTPA may seem overwhelming, our goal is to break this down into manageable chunks. This is meant to be an overview, and we will be going into more in depth on each task in the coming weeks. Introduction to edTPA Special Education. As mentioned on the first slide, the edTPA is a national teacher performance assessment that has been designed to ensure that teachers are learner ready on day one. To evidence your readiness, you will teach content that is consistent with what you would normally teach at your clinical site. Your planning and your instruction should be designed according to what is normally being taught at your setting. Our teacher candidates teach in a variety of settings. Some of you are teaching whole group, while others are teaching small groups, and others still are teaching in one-on-one settings. For this assessment, you will develop an in-depth case study of one learner, which will be referred to as your focus learner. The focus learner should have multiple learning needs. This is a way for you to demonstrate your ability to meet the complex needs of your learners. Next, I will discuss an overview of the edTPA. Please note, this is our first introduction to the edTPA, and we will provide a more in-depth look at each of these tasks over the course of the semester. It is also important to note that during the field-based semester, you will submit your edTPA in 3 parts. First, you will submit task 1, and then you'll begin teaching your learning segment. Once you have taught your edTPA lessons, you will submit task 2, and finally, task 3 will be submitted after you analyze your data and assess learning. To review, how many tasks will you submit for your edTPA essential application? That's right, you will submit each task individually for a total of 3 submissions. We will provide feedback to you on task 1 prior to your task 2 submission, and that will allow you to incorporate feedback into tasks 2 and 3 before submitting those. All right, now let's talk about each task. You will identify one learning goal for the focus learner and then plan and provide supports that are related to that learning goal. The learning goal should be related to a relevant state standard. Once you have identified your focus learner and the learning goal, you will then plan for 5 consecutive lessons that are referred to as a learning segment. Each lesson will have a lesson objective and plan supports that are designed to meet the needs of the focus learner with respect to your overall learning goal. The learning segment must be designed to support the focus learner in accessing content that is related to their learning goal, as well as allow them to demonstrate their learning to at least one IEP goal or an applicable relevant accommodation or modification that has been listed in their IEP to help support the learning environment, content, or instructional strategies. This learning segment should be planned and taught in your setting in a consistent way with your usual practice. For most focus learners, this will be either in a small group or whole class setting. After planning the learning segment, you will then teach it. You'll make a video recording that centers on your interactions with the focus learner during instruction within your usual setting. You will also keep a daily assessment record to monitor and focus on the learner's progress towards the learning goal, as demonstrated by his or her performance in relation to their lesson objectives. Upon completion of the 3 tasks, you will submit artifacts from these tasks that include your lesson plans, clips from your video recording, assessment materials, instructional materials, learner work sample, as well as commentaries that have been written to explain and reflect on your planning, instruction, and assessment components of each task. The artifacts and commentaries for each task will then be evaluated using rubrics that are specifically developed for each task. edTPA tasks and the cycle of effective teaching. We hope that this graphic looks familiar to you, as it is quite similar to our cognition of teaching model that you will find at the beginning of your field-based manual. The 3 edTPA tasks represent a cycle of effective teaching, or teaching that is focused on meeting specific needs to support learning. Planning Task 1 documents your intended teaching. Instruction Task 2 documents your actual enacted teaching. And Assessment Task 3 documents the impact of your teaching on the learning of the focused learner. Our hope is that you will see the connection between the edTPA requirements and what you have learned in your previous coursework about being a reflective practitioner. For each opportunity that you have to teach, we have asked that you are planned in advance, and what you teach your lesson, you reflect on that learner performance data and analyze it to make instructional decisions for your next lesson. This process is what you will also do for the edTPA, but for a learning segment over the course of 5 lessons. The 3 tasks and the artifacts that you provide for each will evidence your deep understanding of your focus learner and how they learn. As you design your task 1 and ultimately teach your lessons, you will reflect on this cyclical relationship of planning, teaching, and assessing student learning. Next, we'll talk about how you are going to evidence your teaching practice. An essential part of edTPA is the evidence that you will submit of how you planned, taught, and assessed your lessons to deepen learning of content that is reflected in the learning goal. This evidence includes both artifacts and commentaries. We'll first take a look at artifacts. This represents authentic work that has been completed by you and your focused learner. These include your lesson plans, copies of any instructional or assessment materials, data collection procedures, video clips of your teaching, and a work sample from the focused learner. Commentaries are your opportunity to describe your artifacts, where you have the opportunity to explain the rationale behind your choices and analyze what you have learned about your teaching practice and its impact on your focused learner. One of the areas that we wanted to call to your attention is the way the handbook is structured. For each task, you will find 4 sections that provide specific instructions on how to complete each of the 3 tasks of the edTPA Special Education Assessment. Within each task, instructions are organized into 4 sections. The first is, what do I need to think about? This section will provide you focused questions for you to think about before you begin completing the task. Next is, what do I need to do? This section provides specific and detailed instructions for completing the task. What do I need to write? In this section, directions will tell you exactly what you need to write and also provide specific and detailed directions for writing the commentary for each of your tasks. Finally, how will the evidence of my teaching practice be assessed? This section includes the rubrics that will be used to assess the evidence you provide for each task. It's important to note that the rubrics that are included in the edTPA handbook are what will be used to assess you on your student teaching submission. However, during our field-based semester, we will be utilizing the ISU rubric for the edTPA. SED Tasks Overview. For tasks 1 through 3, you will find that there will be an overview of what you need to do. So for each of the tasks, you will see a bulleted list. So it's taking all of the information from task 1 and giving you a summary of what needs to be done. And then there will be a column that tells you what you need to submit. Pay careful attention to this column, as this is how we will have you label each part of your submission for each of the tasks. And finally, they will show you an evaluation rubrics. So which rubrics are aligned with which section of the edTPA tasks 1, 2, or 3. Again, this is really important criteria for you to reference for when you're in student teaching. But again, we will use the ISU edTPA rubric for our assessment purposes. Let's talk about some additional resources. Making Good Choices is a support guide that will help you make good choices as you create and implement your edTPA learning segment. It is not a substitute for reading the handbook. Instead, it should be used as a reference where you can find supplementary advice for completing specific components of edTPA as needed. We encourage you to read the entire handbook before you start your edTPA work. We recognize that the handbook is dense. Reading it thoroughly before you start your work will help you to navigate the requirements once you do begin the work. Don't skip any sections, text boxes, or footnotes. Everything in your handbooks provides you important information that will help you guide in your decision making. Once you have read the entire handbook, Making Good Choices will support your decision making as you begin to develop your artifacts, respond to the commentary prompts for all 3 of the tasks. By reading and reflecting on the questions and suggestions in Making Good Choices, you will begin to develop a deeper understanding of edTPA, and we imagine many of your questions will be addressed. This document will help you think about how to plan, instruct, and assess learning while reflecting on future instruction for your learner. Additionally, we encourage you to check out the resources that are available on ReggieNet under edTPA documents, and of course, check in with your coordinators if you have specific questions. We are excited to review your edTPA when you submit it and read all about your thinking, rationale, and your understanding of your learners.